All right. Welcome. Thank you for doing this, by the way.
Oh, this is exciting.
Where are you located currently? You look like as if you might be in like a closet or something.
Right now, I'm in my professional recording studio
Yeah.
slash closet in
Gotcha.
my new home of Lake Tahoe, State Line, Nevada.
Very nice.
Yeah.
Is there any advantages in Nevada versus California currently that would compel you to cross the border?
Yeah, there's some advantages like no tax is a good benefit of living in Nevada. So that's the big one that most people look at. And things are so much easier. You know, you go to the DMV and you wait 15 minutes and then you're right there getting your driver's license. You know, it's a much smaller state. So I like the convenience of that too. But, you know, I'm half a mile from the state line. The casinos are the border. So I'm in California all the time. It's like, you know,
Yeah.
random.
Yeah, I'm just wondering if there's any differences in like local policies regarding, current lockdown, mask, no masks, that type of stuff, or is it pretty much the same in both?
Yeah, there's a lot of differences. I mean, Nevada is kind of the Wild West, you know. You remember the mayor from Vegas was this known wild man, and he was always controversial, but people loved him. They elected him mayor, and there's kind of a free spirit out here. But I think it's like been a swing state politically, if I recall. So you kind of have all types around here, and especially in Lake Tahoe, people are really concerned about nature and conservation, no matter what their politics are. So it's kind of like a common ground to appreciate this wonderful treasure up here in the mountains.
Well, nice. Anyway, well, Brad, people may not know you. I, of course, I've met you many times, or at least several times, and so I'm aware of some unique and interesting accomplishments. So, give us a little bit of background, if you don't mind.
Oh my goodness, I've been heavy into this ancestral health movement for the last 12 years, working with Mark Sisson to promote, a fresh, exciting new way of life that's millions of years old, right, based on the evolutionary health model. So we've been writing books together for many years. Mark built this brand called the Primal Blueprint, and we had many books along those lines. We wrote a book about keto, and it was one of the first books published. It was called The Keto Reset Diet, and became a New York Times bestseller and was part of the momentum to kick off that amazing lifestyle craze. And now here we are with, I feel like, another breakthrough, and it's so fascinating to me to see what you guys are doing in the carnivore space and at MeatRx. And boy, it's been kind of an eye opener for me to embrace what you guys have been talking about. And I feel like an exercise in challenging fixed beliefs and keeping an open mind, because for all this time, we've taken for granted that vegetables are the centerpiece of a healthy diet. And of course, meat is healthy too, because this is how primal humans lived. And that was the paleo boilerplate message. And, it was an awakening for me. And I had to sit back and listen very carefully to your show several times on Joe Rogan and Paul Saladino talking through the problems with the plant antigens, and the people that have had these amazing healing stories like Amber and Michaela. And for me, it's been great to kind of challenge myself to maintain an open mind, be willing to try new things, maybe to go back on the things that I've written and told people to do, and try to continue to progress with the message. And especially these days, because I think there's so much controversy and arguing and name calling back and forth, and people getting more and more stuck in their rigid beliefs in all areas, not just diet. What we're seeing in the world here. So it's a nice thing to be a part of at whatever level I can contribute, and I'm so glad to be on the show. So that's my kind of background in the space. And one thing that you and I share in common is that we're older guys, and we're still pursuing competitive passions. And I'm so happy to talk about that, because I was an old-time athlete back in the day. I was a professional triathlete, competed on the world circuit for 9 years. At my very best, I was national champion and ranked number 3 in the world. But that was a long, long time ago. And then I found myself wondering, what's next? I retired from the circuit. I had to get a real job, raise a family. I started coaching coaching little kids, and I became more and more interested in dominating them at every single practice. So I became this participatory coach, and I had a new athletic goal, which was to throw down on these poor little soccer players, basketball players. I would coach track and take them down on the interval workouts, and it was so much fun. And then my son highly encouraged me to go find my own competitive passions, and that's where I kind of landed today in the sport of speed golf and high jump are my two, current fascinations. And it's just so fun to, wake up in the morning and have a compelling goal to go pursue. And of course, I had that period of my life where I lived and breathed triathlon. It was my career. We were training all day, pushing my body to the absolute limit. And that's no longer appropriate at age 55 to be obsessed with your sporting accomplishments and your whole day is organized around training. So now what I've enjoyed is finding competitive outlets and training methods that promote my health rather than compromise it, which they do as a triathlete, and have a nice, perfect fit into all the other responsibilities and interests that I have in life, where I can keep that competitive fire burning, but place it in the proper perspective rather than this kind of do or die experience that you get immersed into when you're a professional competitor.
Yeah, I definitely feel your pain in regard to that. It is tough to let go of some of that stuff, and it's kind of, that I don't think that competitiveness ever really goes away completely. One thing I want to comment on is, you talk about open-mindedness, and I think really the one thing I appreciate about this community, and as we grow and we learn more, it really is a bottom-up approach to health. When I say that, we're taking what we're finding that's working for the large community and allowing them to contribute and drive the message upwards to physicians and, hopefully later to insurance companies and then maybe governing bodies. Whereas right now we're very much in this top-down paradigm, and it's largely driven by pharmaceutical companies that say, hey, look, you have this disease. We're going to tell you how to treat it. We're going to make this drug and we're going to run it down the chain. And, the goal here, unfortunately, is very conflicted, and there's a huge financial goal in that, because it's like we want to, the pharmaceutical companies, their board of directors cares about what's the bottom line, and so that is the goal at the end when you have this top-down approach, particularly when pharmaceutical companies are at the top. Bottom-up approach, we got everyday real people suffering, and we're figuring out what works, and this is a great thing. I get immersed in this every single day. It's one of my greatest pleasures of my day is to spend time with this community when I'm not interviewing people like yourself and other really cool people. I spend time just asking us, and we're saying, what's going on? What's working for you? Let's all come together as a community. And that's really an interesting, I think, paradigm shift from what we're doing. And I think it's more effective, quite honestly. I think it will be more effective in the long run. With regard to, the fact that does a carnivore diet work for certain conditions and certain people? I'm definitely seeing that. I'm seeing that as probably, again, in my view is right where it is here with people that are doing this, is that it works really well for a lot of things, which is really surprising. Things that even some of the other ancestral diets, whether it's keto, paleo, don't seem to work as well for. I think particularly inflammatory disease, autoimmune disease, some of the digestive disorders like Crohn's disease and also colitis. So really interesting stuff. And of course, it works very well for metabolic stuff like diabetes and weight loss and all that stuff, which is cool too. Let's talk a little bit about speed golf. What the heck is it? Tell us a little about that. I know what it is, but I'm sure most of us are going with speed golf. That sounds kind of interesting.
It's pretty fascinating, and everyone I talk to, seems to be engaged, or at least they're humoring me, because we all know what the sport of golf is all about, and there's, a passionate community that plays golf, but there's so many negative aspects of it, in my opinion, that it takes 5 freaking hours to play the game. It's extremely difficult, so the average player doesn't really get a lot of great satisfaction when they're taking 100 strokes and it says par is 72, and you don't get a workout. You're out there eating potato chips and pretzels and drinking a soda at the halfway point, and you get home and you're exhausted from doing nothing but waiting for your turn to hit the next shot. So this sport has been kind of a grassroots underground movement for decades, really, and the official tournaments that we compete in take your golf score. So you're playing in a golf tournament, keeping score, but they're also timing you. So when you head off on the first tee, they start the stopwatch, and every minute that you're on the course counts for a point, and every stroke counts for a point. So you add those together and you get your speed golf score. I'm a pretty good player. I'm ranked in the top 20 in the world. I'm not up there with the very best guys, but I'm really close. And my best score in a tournament is a 78 in 47 minutes. And you add that together, that's 125. And so you're looking at the results of the tournament, and you'll see someone shot a 117, a 121. It's kind of funny to look at the numbers, but it's a beautiful Zen-like sport because you're out there and you're forcing your brain to go into reactive mode and rely on your intuition and your natural athletic ability to hit these shots. Unlike golf, which is such a highly analytical sport, and people get so caught up in their brain and they're sitting there, trying to model what they've seen on TV, where the announcer says it's 157 to the back pin and there's a slight left to right wind. He's going to choose an 8-iron. No, it's a 9-iron, and the average player's out there with this giant bag of clubs, taking forever to decide and thinking all these thoughts in their head instead of letting the athletic ability come out. So when you're running through the golf course, you just have to go up to the shot, catch your breath, and swing the club. And we don't carry a full bag. So you're making all these creative shots with in between with whatever you got, choking down on that 8-iron, taking a half swing, visualizing your shot, and you don't calculate the yardage and all these things because there's no time to do that. And if you hit a bad shot, oh my gosh, you don't even have time to get mad. You just take off running and go to the next shot, see what you face, and all of a sudden you're done playing golf. And it's such an amazing experience to just kind of be in that zone. You're forced into that peak performance zone for the entire round. It's the opposite of the the frustration that so many golfers speak of when they can't do what they did on the driving range before the round. And what's really cool is you talk to the players that compete in these tournaments, and almost everyone plays as good or better than when they're spending 5 hours out there with a caddy telling them what to do and with 14 clubs instead of 5 clubs. So I encourage anyone who's a golfer that has even a basic level of fitness, you can go out there and just jog a few holes and kind of get into a different mindset and have a wonderful, also a fitness experience too. So when I go play speed golf, first of all, I can play very frequently because I go out there before dark and I play 9 holes and it takes me 30 minutes and I'm back home for dinner.
Yeah, I guess, maybe if you take some of the you kind of, when you're doing this running, jogging, and you just go up there and you hit the shot, you kind of take some of the mental, some of the psychology out of it. And it's kind of more relaxed, I assume. You just get up there, swing, and, you kind of just don't overthink it, I suppose.
Yeah, and we all have this innate athletic ability that comes through if we get out of our own way and stop thinking about it. And you can see, little kids, when you throw them a ball and they catch it, all these things that are beneath the surface of this highly analytical brain, those are allowed to come out. And what I find is, like, for particular shots, like let's say a long putt. So any golfer knows you can't calculate how to hit a long putt like you can with a 7-iron. You know that you hit your 7-iron 160 yards. If you swing well and you catch the ball in the middle, you know where it's going to go. But a long putt is entirely feel for every player. It's not taking the club back 2 feet 6 inches and swinging the putter through. And so on something like that, where I just run up to the ball and look at the hole, I'm routinely putting it, 4 inches from the pin because my brain knows how to hit the putt. It's just that it's just that I'm in my way so many times when I'm playing a serious golf round and taking too long to think about the putt.
Yeah, and correct me if I'm wrong, Brad, but didn't you hold a world record for maybe a single hole or something along those lines, if I'm not mistaken?
Oh, yes. Thank you for asking, Sean. That's right. As a matter of fact, so I described tournament speed golf, where you time yourself, you play 18 holes, and you write down your score, and you compete just like a golf tournament. And then I discovered on YouTube a few years ago this amazing offshoot. This guy in England had broken the Guinness World Record for the fastest single hole of golf ever played. And so they established a standard. It has to be 500 yards. You can't go play a tiny little par 3. So we're talking about a lengthy par 5 hole. And the rule is you hit the ball, they time you, doesn't matter your score really, and then you finish the stopwatch when the ball goes in the hole. And I became captivated by pursuit of this record because it was really difficult. I had to practice for many months. I created an innovation, which was to just play the hole with one club rather than a little bag of choosing the right club for each shot. I just made myself learn how to chip with a 3-wood, putt with a 3-wood, and of course hit a couple long shots with a 3 wood off the tee. And it was a wonderful experience because it had all these different levels where I was innovating. I was kind of creating a new approach. The Guinness World Record process is really rigorous. You have a 12-week application process. And then on the day of the record, the guidelines are that you have to have 10 freaking people out there to have an official record attempt. So I needed 2 timers, 2 official witnesses. I needed a filmographer. I needed a cameraman. And I needed 2 random people that I'd never met before to sign up as official witnesses, so they had no vested interest in my success. So I had to assemble this dream team, and I kind of felt that pressure, to go for this record because it had been so many months of lead up and organizing it and talking to the golf course and getting permission. So it got those butterflies going. And then the other cool thing about it is I'm running a full out sprint now for, it's like running the quarter in a track meet. And so you're allowed multiple attempts at the record on the same day, but you realize if I'm running a full all-out 400-meter sprint, the first time is going to be by far the best attempt. And then if I try again, I'm going to be tired. And so I had to really have this do or die approach where it was like, I'm going to sprint as fast as I can and cross my fingers and hope that I can execute these shots when I'm breathing, heavy and barely catching my breath. And you can see it on YouTube. I put everything together. It was like a miracle performance because I got a birdie on this par 5 hole. So I scored a 4 with basically 4 perfect shots with a 3-wood while sprinting full speed the entire way. So that thing, it's kind of a folly, and it was just fun and games. I mean, there's Guinness World Records for eating the most peanut butter sandwiches while hanging upside down and all that nonsense. But to me, I like to talk about it because it represented the beauty of pursuing peak performance goals with passion and precision and that intensity where, of course, it wasn't a life or death matter. I didn't get a giant check for $1 million at the green, but my family and my friends were there, and I'll remember the experience for the rest of my life for working so hard and then delivering my best effort under pressure, whether or not it was a record or anyone saw it. It's just the magic of being able to do something like that. And then translating and carrying that experience over to everything that I do in life. So I'm trying to be the best parent I can be. I'm trying to excel in my career and write a good book or put on a good podcast. And I think if we can kind of leverage the athletic experience to all other matters, it really makes for a wonderful life. And then also, as you know, the title of my podcast is Get Over Yourself. So to kind of keep things in a healthy perspective where I'm not getting too caught up in all these things that I'm doing and attaching my self-esteem to the outcome of what I'm doing. I'm just going for it, having fun, and then, letting the results fall where they may.
Yeah, and you didn't mention, but did you get it on the first attempt? Was that the first attempt you?
Yeah, it was the first attempt. I actually broke the record twice, one time in Sacramento, one time in LA. And again, I referenced that, that speed golf description where there's no way I could duplicate what I did on that video and make that birdie if I tried 100 times. I mean, I don't get that many birdies when I'm playing golf for 5 hours with all my clubs. And so to have everything come into place when everyone's watching and the official attempt is on, that kind of thing feels like magic to me.
Yeah, well, I mean, I would assume probably the majority of the people in here will have little aspiration to break the speed golf world record, but let's talk about, because you kind of alluded to the fact that, you're trying to figure out what's efficient. How do I maintain that competitive edge? How do I shift my training? Because you kind of said, like Mark Sisson has said, this chronic cardio, running all the time, spending 3-4 hours a day training is not conducive maybe for health for people. So what have you shifted?
Oh my gosh, it's been such a wonderful shift because when you're deep into that endurance athletic scene, you don't even realize how you're destroying your health every day. And in fact, we think of ourselves as a picture of fitness and then just assume that translates to health. And I had, a great time on the circuit from ages 21 to 30. I was a young guy. I beat myself up every day and got back up and did pretty well, but I also struggled and suffered. And by the time I was done racing, I felt exhausted as a human. I was 30, but I literally felt like I was 80 years old because I'd get out of bed in the morning and I'd be limping over I would actually limp outside to my jacuzzi because I couldn't put weight on my right foot because my plantar fasciitis was so severe. And I'd spend 5 minutes in the jacuzzi doing ankle circles, and only then could I strap up a running shoe and head out the door for an 8-mile run, which is such a ridiculous notion when you think like this is not a healthy thing to do. So as I got older, I realized that, I had to protect my my lower back went out a couple times, I remember. And so I started getting into extreme core exercises because those completely cured any sense of back pain that I've ever had for years since. And I started to develop these different training modalities that were more aligned with anti-aging and general health, as well as a broader association of fitness rather than just being a cardio machine. And so today, in almost every way, I'm much fitter than I was when I was a elite professional athlete, because all I was good for back then was swimming and biking and running in a straight line. And then if the rainstorms came to our town and our neighbors needed to get the sandbags stacked on a wall, I'd wake up the next morning stiff and sore and all these different muscles because I couldn't even lift freaking 25-pound sandbags and make a wall. I was not fit for anything except for the narrow goals that I was pursuing. So now I think the main thing that I'm really enjoying is the sprinting and the explosive work, because I never really paid attention to that when I was younger, and has such a tremendous fitness payoff. And the workouts take less time. They don't mess with your hormones or, cause that chronic overproduction of stress hormones and immune suppression that endurance training does. And it's been wonderful to kind of feel like a real athlete, perform these really explosive, high intensity workouts that are really difficult and challenging. But when I walk away from a track workout, I don't feel trashed and exhausted like I used to after these 87-mile bike rides in the mountains and going home and eating a bunch of sugar and then eating more sugar later that night so I could get up the next morning and do it again. So it's like a complete opposite to my previous fitness experience, what I'm doing these days with sprinting, high jumping, speed golf, the speed aspects of that.
Yeah, one confounder is, you said, in days gone by when you were doing the triathletes and then you're eating a bunch of sugar constantly to sort of presumably refill your glycogen stores. But do you think that was a big enough confounder that if you had done maybe a Zach Bitterish approach where it was a low carb and you're doing the endurance training, you'd feel maybe less trashed with the endurance training?
Oh, absolutely. And I think the sophistication that we've had in training methods, particularly keeping that heart rate below the aerobic maximum so that you're in that maximum fat oxidation state and you're not drifting over into those heart rate zones where you're burning more glucose and less fat. Dr. Phil Maffetone's been one of the leaders in this field, so they call it the MAF heart rate, which is kind of a play on his last name. And it equates with a very, very comfortable training pace. And I actually learned this and embraced this halfway through my triathlon career. And wouldn't you know it, that's when I started winning races and rising up to the top level of the circuit, when I started to take it easier on my body, not be pushing it so many times frequently in workouts, but just going at a steady aerobic pace and climbing the mountains and feeling comfortable at that pace. And so it really takes away a lot of those health risks that maybe the recreational enthusiast has not really embraced yet. They're joining the Tuesday night pack, and the pack is going slightly too fast for their level of fitness, and they're not adapting and improving. So, fortunately, I do still contend that trying to reach the highest professional level is going to be inherently unhealthy, because if you're not training to the very red line of where you're going to break down, someone else is, they're going to kick your ass, then you're going to come home and train a little bit harder. But I was able to do it in a way that generally protected my health. Now, the diet aspect of it, we really didn't know that 25 years ago. So I was eating a lot of complex carbs. I wasn't a junk food machine going for the Hostess pies and all that. But by the time, when it's all said and done, I'm eating hundreds of grams of carbohydrates every single day to fuel these workouts. And you're in that kind of, glucose burning pattern where, obviously you have some health risks associated with consuming that many calories. But if I had to do it all over again, knowing what we know today, the fat adapted endurance athlete, that's clearly where the future is headed. And the great performances that Zach and the other people are doing are showing that the recovery benefits alone are going to warrant all the endurance athletes transitioning over to a more healthier diet that doesn't have that, cheap fuel going into the tank all day long.
What would you, because you talked about redlining and some of that stuff, do you think there is a benefit to periodically doing that? And what do you think the ratio is? And, like I said, I guess let's put it in terms of what you feel, because I always am a little bit skeptical when people talk about longevity, just because I just haven't seen it demonstrated. I mean, to clinically demonstrate longevity, you need to have people that are walking around at 120 years of age that are still robust and vigorous, and I haven't seen it yet. So I'm a little looked through things with a little bit of skeptical eye. But based on maybe current best knowledge with regard to exercise, what is the blend that you might say seems to be beneficial?
Yeah, great question. Love that. So we know that cardiovascular fitness is really important, but I think it's been misunderstood and misinterpreted to this movement where the baseline fitness experience in the world is people in the gym watching TV and climbing the Stairmaster or plodding along on the treadmill to get in their cardio. And the great leaders in this space, like Dr. James O'Keefe, he has a great TED Talk called Run for Your Life, but not too far and at a very slow pace. I think that's the title. The ability to max out your cardiovascular fitness is pretty easy. It's way lower bar than we think. And the research shows that if you just put in a couple few hours a week at a very comfortable pace, even a brisk walk around the neighborhood, and you accumulate a lot of walking over the course of the week, you are going to have an A+ in cardiovascular fitness. You don't need to run 37 miles a week training for the half marathon. You don't need to get out there and pedal your bike for hours and hours on the weekend and going into the gym and doing 3 spinning classes a week, because anything beyond this baseline level of cardiovascular fitness, you're going to drift into that risk zone where you can have the chronic overproduction of stress hormones and immune suppression and all the things that happens when you do too much cardio. So if we can embrace this idea that we can get cardiovascularly fit pretty easily, then we can pursue the other hugely important notions of total fitness, which is, being able to maintain muscle mass, put your body under resistance load, and do these brief explosive efforts that have massive impact on all aspects of fitness as well as health, like sprinting. I've been a huge fan of sprinting and been sprinting devotedly for 14 years when I first, kicked into this ancestral or the Primal Blueprint approach, where we realized that our ancestors did a lot of low-level movement and then run for your life once in a while, but there wasn't that in-between workout, that steady state cardio that was a little too difficult and done too frequently with insufficient rest between these kind of workouts, a tempo run or a spinning class, or the group exercise boot camp classes that are getting your heart rate up and over that aerobic maximum and into that kind of no man's land where you're doing a slightly stressful workout over and over and over throughout the week. So we can also acknowledge that just doing a strength training session is giving you a huge cardiovascular workout, right? Unless you're resting for 12 minutes between sets, you're going into the gym, you're working out for 30 minutes, 40 minutes, whatever, you're doing CrossFit, you're doing any kind of thing, you're still getting awesome cardio, even when you're doing what is mostly considered to be a strength training session. So I've recently kind of ditched this lifelong habit of going out in the morning and jogging with my dogs. It's just sort of a very slow pace, health boosting activity, but it started to get kind of mundane and boring. And with my high jump goals being at front and center right now, what I do instead is I head out the door, I jog for a little bit, and then I'll go do a fun, exciting challenge in nature, like jump up and down off a granite rock 10 times, and then I'll walk for 5 or 10 minutes, whatever it takes to catch my breath, and then I'll do a series of running technique drills. I have these on YouTube. You can say Brad Kearns running technique drills, and I have these little drills that I do that actually are pretty strenuous and really help you cement good technique for running, but they also work a better range of motion for your muscles. And so these little sets that might take 20 or 30 seconds are pretty difficult. I have to walk to recover. And then by the time I get home from this 40-minute outing, I've done all kinds of different things. I've built my balance, my flexibility, my mobility. I've done sport-specific activities to improve as a high jumper. Just vertical jumping up and down a few times off the ground is extremely strenuous. I'm doing weight-bearing activity when I'm jumping up and down. And I'm still getting an excellent cardiovascular workout with less risk than that person who's out there jogging every day and possibly drifting over that aerobic limit because it's very easy to do, and then not doing much of anything else except for running straight forward.
Excluding your actual sporting goals, high jump, and obviously there's different things you're going to do to train for that. But just as a general person, how would you pattern, say, a week of training? What would it look like for somebody you'd say just whose goal is only just I want to live a long time and I want to be relatively healthy? What would you say?
Well, here's another thing that I've kind of trended to in my advanced age group. I'm 55 now. I got you beat by a little bit, but we have noticed and acknowledged that in the passing years and decades, it gets more difficult to recover. And I'm also very busy with other life responsibilities where I'm trying to get away from being this jock guy that I was for a decade and realize that workouts need to fit in to the other things that are important in life. And I don't want to trash myself so that I'm too tired to open up my laptop and start typing in the afternoon. So I've really embraced in recent years this concept of micro workouts where you do really short duration explosive efforts over the course of the day and perhaps spread out so that I'm not really doing that many extreme devotion, high intensity workouts that last 47 minutes like a CrossFit class or what have you, because I find for me, they're oftentimes too tough and they take too long to recover from. So I'm trying to get out to the track regularly and do a pretty difficult and challenging sequence of jumping drills and high jump practices. But if I can do that once a week, I'm happy. And the rest of the time, you might find me in my living room with my X3 bar, which you turned me on to, man. That thing's unbelievable. And I'll work with that thing for, oh my gosh, a few minutes. I'll do maybe 3 sets of stuff. And that maybe once a day is plenty. And then I'm doing other stuff with my leg drills and stretches and mobility work. And that might take 3 or 4 or 5 minutes at a different time of the day. And if you piece those all together and add them up over the course of a year, another example is I have the hex bar deadlift on the side of my yard. And it happens to be on the path where I go to throw my garbage into the garbage barrel. So when I throw the garbage out, let's say that's once every 2 days or something, I always do a set or 2 of deadlifts. That's not a big deal. That's not a 5x5 with a reverse set and a superset, all that stuff. But if I can make that part of my lifestyle and we check back 365 days later and I've lifted 250,000 extra pounds that I might not have, that didn't count as a workout. I didn't write it down in my training log that did 1 set of deadlifts today, but putting those and sprinkling those things in to our largely sedentary patterns in daily life, when you're talking about a knowledge worker that's sitting in front of a screen, that thing has been a huge boost to me, because then when I go out and actually do a proper workout at the gym or at the running track, I'm much more resilient against injury, and I have a higher fitness base from which to launch these workouts because I take the time at home to do a 7-minute leg mobility flexibility sequence, and I do stuff like that every single day, so that when I do go to the track, it's not like this big extreme event that requires 7 days to recover from, which that used to be that 5-10 years ago. I'd go out there and blast myself, and I would be limping for several days later because I just wasn't highly adapted. I was a guy in my 40s trying to compete with the high school varsity kids.
Yeah, and I appreciate the kind of almost the fun aspect of that, because I can walk by, and you could walk by, like I'd say a big rock that you could maybe pick up a little bit, and maybe you have a rock sitting in your yard, and you just kind of a couple times a day you walk by it, you pick it up, and or drop down, and I was doing it. And I do all these different things. I mean, there was a period where I was doing 300 push-ups a day, and I would just, I just break it up into sets of 30, and I do 10 sets throughout the day, and did that for like 3 months or something like that. I think I did it for 100 days, and that was kind of a fun way to do that, and just kind of these different types of things. Do you, are you working with actual clients? Are you doing some coaching, Brad? I can't remember if you're doing that or not.
I do very little, not officially, because I'm trying to focus on the other areas of reaching more people, like with my podcast and my YouTube videos that we put up on the Primal Blueprint channel. We put a regular sequence of those up, and they really, people have really become interested in them. So it's kind of fun for me because fitness has always been kind of in the background. Yeah, people knew I was an old jock, but I was in the health space and writing books and talking about diet mostly. But this seems to be such an important element of the entire big picture. So I'm glad to kind of get more and more immersed into the fitness message, especially because I know you're frustrated too, Sean, when you see, we've talked about the mainstream medical and diet scene, but the fitness scene is arguably just as screwed up. And you take these poor suckers that walk into a gym, well-meaning people that want to get in shape, and a personal trainer or the system, the group exercise classes will destroy them, and their career will last 12 weeks, and then they'll be on the sidelines back home with bronchitis or an injured leg or something because no one bothered to really adapt them gradually and say it's okay to not push yourself so hard at a workout to the point where you're suffering. And these are the messages that the elite athletes have modeled for decades. The elite athletes aren't out there killing themselves and puking on the corner on the side of the track. They're working well within their means almost at all times and building steadily over a career to where they're breaking world records. But we somehow became disconnected and now associate fitness with no pain, no gain, and struggling and suffering. And boy, that's time. It's time to turn that around and embrace this new creative idea where your backyard can be the most wonderful gym that you've ever imagined, and doesn't have to take a huge effort to get in your car, drive, find a parking lot. I love when I see people cruising for a parking spot at a gym parking lot. I'm like, really? You can't park down a block away and walk it? But all that complexity, I think, is turning off the average fitness enthusiasts who could just do better by moving more in general everyday life.
Yeah, and we have, like I said, within this community and many others, there's people coming from all levels of starting points. Some of them coming from very, very deconditioned and, medically, problematic starting points. We see people, and one of the things that we see is, we have a number of sort of diabetics in here, and we do see that, unfortunately for them, the high intensity stuff leads to significant increases in blood glucose because of the gluconeogenesis from the liver trying to deal with that and the insulin resistance. And so I don't know if you have any commentary on how to manage that. I've got some ideas on that, but I don't know if you've kind of put it in the context, because so many people in the U.S. and now other countries are dealing with diabetes, prediabetes, insulin resistance, and so on and so forth.
Well, I wouldn't want to comment on a medical expertise perspective, but it occurs to me that you can obtain a ton of benefits from a 10-second explosive effort. And my friend, Dr. Craig Marker, I think he's one of the great progressive minds in the fitness scene. He wrote this transformative article. It's one of my favorite things I've seen in a long time, and it's titled HIIT versus HURT. So HIIT being the high intensity interval training, and his take on that, or his adaptation, it's called high intensity repeat training. And he argues for a workout that's overall less stressful and less destructive because you take what he calls luxurious rest intervals in between your explosive efforts. And secondly, you limit those explosive efforts to this sweet spot, this window of 10 to 20 seconds. We know that if you try to deliver a maximum effort in anything, whether it's rowing, swinging kettlebells, sprinting down the running track, if you try to put out more than 20 seconds, you're no longer at maximum output. You're doing you're trying to go for 5 minutes. So that's kind of actually a mix between aerobic and anaerobic when you get out there to a 5-minute all-out effort. So if the average person can go limit their sprints or whatever they're doing into that 10 to 20 second window and then rest for perhaps 5 times longer than they just gave the maximum effort, it's going to be a workout that's not going to blast the blood glucose out of the ballpark. I'm figuring that out now because I got my patch on, and I do see that glucose dumping into the bloodstream when I'm doing an extremely difficult workout. But my workouts are lasting for too long for a diabetic to hang anyway. But if you can go out there and just do a handful of 10-second sprints, let's say on a stationary bike, so it's not weight bearing and you're not getting overly stressed in that manner, do a 10-second sprint and then pedal gently for 60 seconds, another 10-second sprint, and call it a workout. before you start to get into that stress mode where the stress hormones are dumping into your bloodstream, the glucose is dumping into your bloodstream, and you're having repercussions afterward. Dr. Marker in this article calls out, it describes how if you ask yourself to sprint for longer than 20 seconds, what happens is you actually break down this cellular structure. It's called disassembling and deamination, and you're talking about a long recovery time after the spinning class that asks you to do 10 sprints of 30 seconds with 30 seconds rest are these crazy things that an elite athlete would never contemplate because it's too stressful, causes too much cellular breakdown, ammonia toxicity in the hours afterward, which gives you that brain fog and those sugar cravings and all these things that happen when you've worked out too difficult. So keeping those sprints tight, I think, would be seems reasonable for someone who's maybe unfit, suffering with metabolic disease, or just getting into this and doesn't want to get burnt out and sent home after 12 weeks. This stuff is kind of easy to embrace for everybody.
Yeah, I want you, because obviously the Tabata protocol, which, 20 seconds on, 10 seconds off. And I always thought that was silly because I thought by the time you got to your second or third interval, you had no intensity. And I thought that was I never really embraced that. And I've always been a fan of, 6-to-1, 8-to-1, rest to work intervals, things like that. When you say luxurious, are you talking, 20 seconds sprinting, 3 minutes recovery? Or are you saying 20 seconds for sprinting, 15 minutes recovery? What do you mean by luxurious?
Yeah, that's Dr. Marker's quote. I love that. And I think there's some reference to like a 5-to-1 work to rest ratio. But in real life, when I'm out there doing my high jump drills, I do favor bringing an intuitive element into the mix. So one of the things I do as a template is I do 8 times 70-meter all-out sprint down the football field. And my rest period might get longer when I'm getting up to number 6, 7, and 8, because I want to have a effort of consistent quality. That's what high intensity repeat training means. That means your first one, your last one is just as impressive as your first one. In other words, it might be the same time on the watch, but also the same rate of perceived exertion. So I'm not killing myself on the 8th one just to say I did 11 seconds again like I did on the first one. Everything's under control. So that means I might take a little more rest as I'm feeling the necessity to do so. I might be checking my respiration rate, but it's also that kind of that mental aspect of wanting to step back on the starting line and do another one. And on certain days, I'll feel like a slight tightness in my left glute on my 7th one and go, oh, okay, I'm done. And that takes a lot of focus and discipline and experience, but I really think it's important to kind of step away from that struggle and suffer mentality, take what your body gives you at every workout, and don't try to force more things to happen that are not naturally meant to be on that day. And I've had days where, I'll get in my car, drive down to the track. It's my most exciting workout of the week. I've been waiting days and looking forward to it. And I'll get out there and I just don't feel right. Something's off with my stride. I can feel that sciatic thing acting up again. And I'll have to curtail the workout and just turn it into a jog or doing some drills and go home and wait it out. And, the very best athletes in the world know how to do this. And everyone else is just kind of banging their head against the wall saying, well, it's Tuesday. I'm meeting the group at the track, so I might as well go, even though I have, some glands that are puffing out today, and I kind of have a sore, dry throat. Oh boy, that's just, recipe for disaster.
Yeah, I mean, certainly that comes with a little bit of age. I see that too. If I get the slightest twinge on anything, I immediately shut down, turn a potential 6 weeks out, into a 2 or 3 day niggle type of thing. So let me ask you, there's a question somebody put in here about testosterone. I have my opinions on that. I'm not someone that takes that, haven't ever, but do you find that has a role in what you do currently? Thoughts on, I assume it's testosterone replacement they're asking about, but obviously testosterone has an impact on our health, whether we're male or female. And obviously so he's saying not exogenous. So, I mean, I guess, I guess comment on both, if you will, because I think obviously endogenous testosterone is clearly very important. But what are your thoughts on that? And I guess as someone in their 50s, mid 50s, like I'm pretty much there, I'll be 54 soon. So what about that?
Yeah, that seems to be the essence of hormone optimization for the male and anti-aging, peak performance, and all these things. So I've become more and more interested in it as I get older. I have this thing called the MOFO Mission. You can see it on my website, bradkearns.com, where I'm trying to bring in all aspects of how to nurture healthy testosterone levels, optimize testosterone. It's not just about, let's say, the diet is a huge aspect. Exercise and your training methods are a huge aspect, but there's so much more to it. The level of dysfunction in your romantic relationships and personal relationships and the stress that causes. I have John Gray on my podcast a few times, the great author of Men Are From Mars, Women Are From Venus, and he talks about the complex interplay between male and female in a romantic relationship can either bring your testosterone through the roof where you're excited and you feel that magical spark and you're connected on so many levels and passionate, or you can get into the routine ruts and dysfunctions that cause the male's testosterone level to drop and him to feel inadequate and inefficient and nitpicked and all these terrible things. And so those are just as relevant as choosing, the right foods and getting rid of the sugar and the vegetable oils and all the stuff that messes with your hormone function. So it's been really fun for me to kind of focus on that and emphasize that. I'm trying to be the flag bearer for, our age group here and show people that you don't have to accept this steady, sorry ass decline into spectator mode and spare tire mode, which seems to be the norm to such an extent that we all nod our heads and acknowledge that we're destined to, for example, add an inch to our spare tire every 5 years until, from age 40 to age 70. Some of the stats on the erectile dysfunction drugs, 40% of the prescriptions are dispensed to males in their 40s. Something like, it's 72% of all males between the ages of 40 and 80 report some form of erectile dysfunction. And so it becomes the norm rather than something that's unusual and you have to go see a doctor about. And that's kind of scary. So, I want to fight that battle as much as possible, especially because I've been that guy in my younger years where I trained to such an extreme that I did trash my hormone levels. I was testing all the time back then, and my serum testosterone was between 200 and 300 usually when I was in my 20s, supposedly at my male hormone peak. And now I'm testing routinely 750 to 900, which is, considered superior for a male in my age group. But before I congratulate myself, pat myself on the back for being in the 95th percentile, it's like we should all be striving to be in the 95th percentile because the population group that we're testing is so sorry ass that it's not even worth comparing to, right? So yeah, it's a big thing for me. And you said comment on both of those. So I come from the the world of elite athletics. We were in the anti-doping process, and when I was training, my assumption was if I could be completely clean in every single way, I thought I would be able to get the most out of my body because I would have all the best feedback and be able to monitor the important balance of stress and rest. So I kind of competed before the era of EPO, the blood doping drug that transformed all endurance sports into this craziness that we still see today. But I didn't want any caffeine in my body. I didn't take any non-steroidal anti-inflammatories. Nothing went down my throat except for food because I deemed that to be the very best way to monitor my energy levels, my recovery levels, and all those things. It's obvious that doping up can give you a huge competitive advantage, but I still feel like it's a shortcut to all the different things that you could check off and do your best in everyday life. So, for example, when I was a competitive athlete, I was asleep for half my career. I slept 10 hours every single night, and I took a 2-hour nap every afternoon for those 9 years that I competed on the professional circuit. So I was trying to do everything right and get all that sleep and those nap times when you get the pulsatile testosterone going in and, never trying to put anything bad in my body in terms of diet that would, cause decline. And I think we can still dream of an optimized modern day athlete doing just as well or perhaps better, and of course promoting more longevity than an athlete who dopes up and then goes and eats hot dogs and potato chips after their workout.
Yeah, let me ask you a little bit more. Let's go a little bit more nutrition now. Obviously, people in this group eat a lot of meat. Some of us just only eat meat. As crazy as that sounds to the general person, obviously you've been around long enough to see that maybe it's not as crazy as we think it is. And I think within the low carb community over the last few years, more and more people are maybe being less uh, less inclined to say it's totally crazy and maybe say there's something there. Certainly, my experience has been that just within the low carb community, particularly, there's been a greater shift towards accepting meat as a health food rather than kind of, kind of keeping it as a condiment, as people like Dr. Mark Hyman might suggest, calling it condimeat. What are your thoughts around the consumption of meat and longevity, performance, so on and so forth?
Oh boy, I've never heard that term condomeat. That's kind of funny. So I started to become exposed to this stuff now over 3 years ago. I give you credit because seeing you on Rogan, that was early. That was like in late 2017, I believe. I was talking to Danny Vega, the wild man down in Florida, and this was at Paleo FX, I believe, in 2017. And he said, "Yeah, I'm doing this weird diet and testing my blood and tracking my body fat, and everything's superior. It's amazing. All I'm doing is eating stuff that comes from a cow. That's my rule." And I kind of, passed off. I kind of just like acknowledged his comment and then went about my busy life without really, opening up to the idea of what this guy was talking about. My triglycerides are down. This is better. My inflammatory markers are down. I'm down from 9% to 6%. The guy's already Rip City and he's even better with this new diet. But I didn't dig deeper because it was kind of outside of my my driving lane. And then as more accumulation came from you guys, the leaders that I mentioned earlier, I was kind of compelled to try it out. And I think it's been, a life-changing transformation for my long time, very healthy, very ancestral primal paleo diet. I was in the habit of routinely going into the produce section and getting giant piles of greens to stir fry, and I'd make them for my entire family, with pounds of stuff because I'm serving for 8 people when we have a family gathering, and everyone loved my colorful stir fry things, and this is the healthiest thing you could possibly eat. But then, I'm starting to listen to the message, the rationale that some of these plant antigens might be bothering people, and I won't call myself a sufferer because I didn't really notice any adverse effects to throwing all these plant foods down my throat. But what I noticed when I switched to more of a carnivore-ish pattern was just a complete lack of digestive discomfort and elimination discomfort that had always been with me in one way, shape, or form for my whole life. And again, back to the spare tire example, it's just normal. Of course, you're going to get gas bloating, indigestion, have some elimination troubles over the course of a year. This or that happens. You got a little bug. You work through it after 3 or 4 days, and then your elimination's back to normal, and you don't think anything of it. But since cleaning up and kind of not going and looking for massive produce and other plant life, it's been an awakening, and I'd say I feel fantastic, and am a strong advocate for it. But again, I don't have that compelling necessity to be 100% eliminating things that I might want to eat to enjoy my life. I like my dark chocolate, and I make a nut butter product myself called Brad's Macadamia Masterpiece. It's delicious. It's a wonderful dessert. If you're sensitive to nuts, then I suggest you don't buy it. But if you're not and you feel no ill effects, hey, it's part of, there's a lot of nutritional benefits and probably not a lot of downside. But you know what? If you have any form of, I don't need to preach to this choir, but if there's any nagging condition that you can't seem to shake, that's been going on for a long time, autoimmune, anti-inflammatory, whatever, it's certainly worth a restrictive period for 30 days. You have nothing to lose. And I think that kind of message that you guys are, putting out is going to be a wonderful awakening for so many people around the world that are just completely frustrated. Oh my gosh, I met a neighbor up here, and he lives on the lake, and he just sold his spread for $46 million. The most beautiful place you'll ever see, with a guest house and thoroughbred racing stables and the whole thing. And I said, well, why are you moving, George? And he goes, I got this condition called psoriasis, and the dry air up here just aggravates it so bad that we're moving back to the Bay Area. And I'm like, oh my God, will you please click on some of these links and watch some of these videos and educate yourself? This guy could have done a 30-day hardcore carnivore experiment and kept his $46 million spread on the lake, but nope, it's too late. The escrow is closed, and who knows who's advising him, and if he's in the mainstream medical machine, of course, that he may never awaken to the possibility that the solution is so simple.
I'll tell you what, Brad, send him my way. We'll get him to fun.
I was going to make a deal. I was going to just propose, like, hey, man, if I can help you cure this thing, can I just have your guest house? Because there's the main house, and there's a little 2,500 square foot guest house. He probably doesn't even use it. So we were in negotiations, and then it was too late. The train kept moving.
Well, that's too bad. I was going to say we could get him to fund our clinical trial. I don't know if we're raising capital for a fit.
Yeah, I love that. Right the thermometer's growing, man. You guys are doing a great job.
Yeah, I have no doubt we'll get there. It's just a matter of when, and we'll see what we can get done. Because I do agree this is something, and it's kind of interesting. We've got some internal data on about 12,000 people, and we've been going back and through and reanalyzing the data. It seems like about 90 days, 3 months seems to be that period where you really start to see a big jump in the number of people that have success. And then it also is very linear. It's like if you start at 70% carnivore, you get X level of benefit, and then 80%, and then 90%, and then 100. And so the people that are 100 do seem to have a better response. Now, the difference between 100 and 90 is not as big as it is from, say, 90 to 70 or 80 to 70. So there's a 70 seems to be a decent point, but then it rises up. And, the rate of rise slows down, but definitely, for some people. And then if you cross-reference it by like autoimmune disease and how many meds they came off, we see higher relationships. So it's really interesting data. Like I said, we have a lot of people to sample from. And so that's interesting. So, Brad, wow. We are rapidly up on an hour. I tend to try to keep this to an hour just because I want to be respectful of people's time on both yours and some of our members, because they start to get hungry for their ribeyes, but right around now. But, hey, tell us where we can find out more about where you are and that sort of stuff.
Oh, you can go look at bradkearns.com. I have all kinds of fun stuff on there, videos, and the links to my books. And my podcast is called Get Over Yourself. Had a great time having you on there. One of our favorite shows and most downloaded shows. So there's clearly a fascination with this carnivore movement. I encourage you guys to keep doing what you're doing. I'd love to be a part of it in any way. I should also put in a plug for, my world's been mostly people are focused on dropping excess body fat. I mean, that's got to be overpowering number one goal from anyone moving into any form of regimented diet. And there's simply nothing that even compares to jumping into this carnivore pattern to drop excess body fat. And I did it myself. I have a funny show on my channel called the Fatty Popcorn Boy Saga, because I started to, I'm still in this carnivore-ish pattern, but I kind of got out of hand with these evening popcorn binges, and I stepped on the scale one day and I was way higher than I'm accustomed to being for the last 30 years. I'm like, what's going on here? And I wasn't paying attention to all the chocolate I was stuffing down my face and the popcorn. And so I locked into, a very strict regimen for, I think it was 6 or 7 weeks. And I lost 7 pounds of body fat like that. And it was no problem and no suffering. And that high satiety factor that you talk about, and the protein that you're getting, the satiety, the lack of carbohydrates. So it's so easy to kick over into accelerated fat burning. So for the sufferers and the curing aspects of carnivore, that's great. But I think that other pillar is also going to be really strong, and I feel like it has the potential to immerse into mainstream as the next super duper hot diet like keto has, but perhaps with better success rate, because now keto's been twisted and misinterpreted into being able to stuff your face all day with fat, and somehow that being promoting of health or weight loss, and it simply doesn't work.
Yeah, I strongly believe that. I strongly believe that we are in my view, probably the best thing going as far as, there's lots of ways to lose weight, but I think when it looks at the overall package, but that remains to be seen. We're going to try to prove that, and that's our goal. So anyway, guys, thank you so much, Brad. Once again, thank you for coming on, and definitely we look forward to continued working together in some capacity. You're doing some great stuff, and like I said, it's great to have more and more people on the same message. All right, guys. See you guys tomorrow. Take care, everybody. Bye-bye.
Thanks.